Beautiful. And I will share my screen. If Dario and Morgan can continue admitting people, that will be fantastic. And can you see my screen and slides?
Yes, good to go.
Beautiful. So welcome again to the Coastal Conservancy Grantee Onboarding webinar. As I mentioned, we're recording this webinar and we'll be posting it on our website and sharing it with you all and others who couldn't join today. Starting off with some introductions, I'm Evan Borgness Sloan. I'm the Deputy San Francisco Bay Program Manager with the Conservancy.
And I'm Dario Bebeda Padilla, South Coast Project Manager.
And I am Morgan Wright with our North Coast region.
Beautiful. So the goals of today's webinar include helping you start, manage, and close your Conservancy grant. So the whole process from start to finish. And it's really intended for new grantees, but is also a refresher for existing or recurring grantees, given that we do continue to update our processes. So hope it's still useful for you. But first and foremost, congratulations on receiving your grant from the Coastal Conservancy. Thank you for all the work you do. We're very excited to help fund your project. Everything that we're covering today is also outlined in our grantee manual, which can be found on our website under grants and resources for grantees. At the very end of this slideshow, I'll do a quick live demo, if all goes well, showing you where some of our resources exist. All right, so this graphic provides a high-level view of our granting process. It's also demonstrating the flow of our presentation today. And like I've already mentioned, we're going to pause after each section and open it up for Q&A, as well as have a Q&A at the end. So feel free to put any questions you have in the chat, or when the time comes in between each section, you can raise your hand and we will call on you after each section. So first, I'm going to kick us off with our grant agreement. So starting with the grant agreement, this document is the legal document between your organization and ours. The project manager at the Coastal Conservancy will be drafting this. There are common terms and agreements from our grant agreements that can be found on our website under resources for grantees. It's also in the grantee manual. So I would really recommend reviewing those typical grant conditions in the grantee manual concurrently while your project manager is drafting your grant agreement. That would be a great time to do that. The grant agreement outlines the terms and conditions of your grant. Of course, we really want to make sure all of our grantees read the full grant agreement before signing it. That's really important. And the first step of our grant agreement process is filling out and signing the payee data record, or standard 204 form. And that provides the Conservancy with your organization's address for receiving your reimbursement checks that will be sent to you. So pretty critical form to get filled out right from the get-go. Your project manager will reach out and send you this form for you to fill out. While your project manager is drafting your grant agreement, it's also important to discuss your project schedule with them, as they'll be outlining 3 important dates that will be specified in your grant agreement. You may be able to extend out some of these dates after the fact, but we really do prefer you try to give yourself flexibility now instead of extending it later. So in terms of those 3 dates, the first one is the work completion date. This is the date that all work that you plan to bill to the Conservancy will be complete. No work after that completion date can be billed to your grant. The next date is the final request for disbursement date. This is the date that you submit your final report and your final invoice, also called a request for disbursement. Generally, this date is set 1 month after your work completion date. And then finally is your termination date. This is the termination of your contract with the Conservancy, that grant agreement. This is typically 3 months after the work completion date. So for construction projects, it's a little different. This date will be 20 years after your completion date, since we expect that all improvements will be in place with any maintenance occurring within those 20 years. Your agreement, moving on from the dates, your agreement has a letter and a number identifier that will start with a G for grant and then have 2 digits. Typically, the first 2 digits are the year we're in, and then a next 3 digits that are just your identifier. That's a change. That's a recent change for our reoccurring grantees. There used to not be a G in front of it, but now that's really helpful for our own housekeeping. And with that, that is the end of our grant agreement section, and Dario will be taking over for conditions precedent, but just want to stop and see if there are any questions. Originally I was going to be calling on hands, but since I'm sharing screen, I can't see anyone. So maybe Morgan, if there's any questions, you could read them from the chat, and Dario, if there's any hands, if you could call on them, that would be super helpful. And if
No
not,
questions.
Dario can take over. Oh, Ben
Oh,
Fried
yeah.
just popped up.
Hey,
Go ahead,
sorry. Thank you. I was just wondering with that STD pay form, is that
Yeah.
something that needs to be signed specific to this grant, or if we've already signed an STD pay form for the Coastal Conservancy, can we sort of reuse it from, months or years ago?
We like to have a new form for each grant, as sometimes addresses change and we just want to make sure we have the most up-to-date information. So it would be great if you could fill out a new form. We have reused some in the past if you have one from like 1 year ago or something like that. So there can be exceptions, but in general, we do like to have a new one for each grant.
Thank you. Perfect.
Yes.
No questions in the chat.
Beautiful. All right, so next is Dario.
Okay, yeah, now we're going to move on to conditions precedent. And so you can start on the conditions precedent now. The grant has been executed, but you cannot start work until all of the documents listed here have been approved. And we'll go over these in more detail now. Next slide, please. Yeah, thank you. All right, next we have the board resolution. This resolution tells us that your governing body has agreed to enter into this agreement with the Conservancy and identifies who will sign the grant agreement. There's a template online, but you may have your own version of this that you would like to use instead. All right, and then for proof of insurance, insurance requirements may differ according to your grant, so check with your project manager. For those returning, we have changed the requirements for insurance. 2 million in liability for construction and 1 million in liability for planning. The State Coastal Conservancy also no longer needs to be listed as a certificate holder. We just need to see proof of insurance. You may need bonding and or a lien release depending on your project, and only if you contract with someone for more than $20,000. If you need specific insurance for this grant and it increases your premium, you can charge your Conservancy grant for that extra charge. Make sure that you talk to your project manager about this. And here's a list of common insurance minimums. We talked about general liability, but here are the minimums for automobile liability, workers' comp, watercraft liability, course of construction, or property insurance. Okay, and before we move on to the work program, are there any questions about those conditions precedent?
While people chew on if they have questions or not, one thing I just realized is another update to our insurance. So we don't need to be listed as the certificate holder, and we also do not need to be listed as the additional insured. So these are 3 new updates to our insurance with the increase in liability for construction, the decrease in liability for planning, and these 2 changes to try to help with any insurance burdens that our grants have caused.
Rose, go ahead.
Hi. So you mentioned that those are the common insurance requirements. How will we know which are the requirements for our grant? Or
Your
are
project
those
manager.
the requirements that we'll need to get?
Yeah, those are the requirements you'll need to get. And again, you'll talk to your project manager for just it depends on like your project activities.
Okay.
Right. So if you don't have any project activities that involve a boat, you do not need to get watercraft
Okay.
liability,
That
for
was kind
example.
of what I was getting at. Yeah. Okay. So our project manager will know which of these we need.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, any more questions? No? All right, now we're going to move on to the work program. Next slide, please. So the work program is a project roadmap that defines the tasks, deliverables, project schedule, and task level budget for the project. It tells us how you'll complete the project, and it may take a few drafts and reviews by the PM. It's a living document that can be modified. So if there are any changes to the project throughout the grant, you can change it. We have the template on our website, and when you open it up, you will see instructions on how to fill it out in orange. Okay, so for the project description, you'll fill in the project description, which provides a concise, high-level summary of your project, stating its goals and what will be done to achieve them. It typically can be one paragraph, but for more complicated projects, you're welcome to have a longer project description. Please use the description from the grant agreement or staff recommendation as a starting point. You will then define the scope of work by task. You can use subtasks to help you stay organized, but when you bill for activities, you will only be using the overall task. There are generally 4 categories of task: project management, planning, implementation, and monitoring. But you can work with your PM to tailor the tasks to fit your project. For each task, you will also define deliverables, which are documents that you will turn into the PM. You will then provide an overall schedule for the project by task. Here's an example of a schedule. As you can, oh, doesn't look like it's showing up. There it is. As you can see, you will use the task number, task title, and deliverables from the scope of work above and provide an estimated start date and completion date for each item. This table will then be copied to the progress report to track deliverables, but more on that later. The budget is critical for, sorry, there we go. Yeah, the budget is critical for invoicing. This will be copied onto the request for disbursement form. A simple budget allows for flexibility. We typically like to see project management charged with the smallest budget, planning in the middle, and implementation with the largest budget. Please work with your PM on the budget. And for example, can you go back? Sorry. So if you have a required grantee match, please fill that in. And if you have some estimated other fundings, please fill that in. But if you don't have those categories, you can go ahead and delete those just to keep it simple. Okay, and then you'll fill out the budget details next. This is where you'll list out things like food, equipment, and travel. And your project manager will use these to make sure all costs and activities billed for align with your approved plan. Please note that all organizations that receive funding from the Conservancy are required to meet strict accounting standards. While rare, there's always the possibility of an audit, so it's the responsibility of all our grantees to use the generally accepted accounting principles published by the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants. Some other notes for labor costs. You don't need to provide us information about hourly rates or number of hours worked in the work program. However, you will provide that as a backup documentation when you submit an invoice. For stipends, a cash payment is allowed, but not things like gift cards or transit passes. Please check with your project manager early if you plan to use stipends in your project. And then for indirect costs, that can't be more than 20% of your overall grant. And we define indirect costs as overhead costs, and you'll work with your accountant to come up with an indirect rate that can be backed up in case of an audit. For subcontracts, you will need to provide the name of the subcontractor and a description of their work for approval from your project manager. And finally, for the plan for acknowledgement, the Conservancy would like to be acknowledged in physical acknowledgements, such as signage and in communications materials that mention your project. This helps give us funding recognition to ensure that future funding is made available to our program. There are some examples here. And please note that we understand that the conditions precedent may take a lot of staff time, so talk to your project manager about charging some staff time to your grant before you get your start work letter. Okay, and then I'm gonna pass it over to Morgan, but before I do, are there any questions about the work program?
I had a quick question about for press releases and any kind of signage. Is a Coastal Conservancy approval required for the recognition language? Should we-
Yes, yeah,
Okay,
signage,
great.
and yeah, there's
Okay.
guidance on our website, and we have some image guidance as well.
Great. Just want to confirm that.
And Rose?
You mentioned, I didn't quite catch it, the flexibility around how to bill for staff time. Can you go back to that and share a little bit more about how that should be written in?
Yeah, so you can put down that you're going to be charging staff time, like the like for what kind of activities they're going to be doing, but we don't want like the name of the people working on it, or like the hourly rates or hours worked, because those things can change over time, and if those are changed, then and they're in the work program, then we'll need to do a work program modification, which is just extra work that we don't want to have to do.
So if we're not sure yet whether a role will be paid staff or a stipend or a contract, how, if it's just understaffed, do we have the ability to bill different types of expenditures under that category?
Oh yeah, you should be able to, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions?
No questions in the chat.
All right, thank you. Morgan, take it away.
Okay, so let's move on to the start work section. All right, so once all the conditions precedent to disbursement have been approved, those are all the documents that Dario just mentioned, your project manager will send you a start work letter or notice to proceed. Once you have received this letter, there's an example on the screen here, you can begin work that will be billed to the grant. Take note of the date shown on the notice to proceed. This is in the top left, circled. Do not invoice for work prior to this start date. Okay, start work, hooray! We'll pause real quickly for questions. If you have any questions on the letter. Don't see any hands. Okay, I think we'll keep moving forward. The next section we will go over is progress reports and invoicing. This is the important tracking paperwork and how you get paid. So how do you get paid? To get reimbursed for project expenses, we ask that you invoice no less than quarterly, which is about every 3 months, and no more than monthly. Again, you may not invoice for work prior to the start date of the project, which again is the date on the notice to proceed. Invoices consist of the progress report, request for disbursement form or RFD, and backup documentation that will support expenses listed on the RFD form. We'll go over each of these items over the next few slides. All of these documents should be combined into a single PDF and emailed to invoice@scc.ca.gov, and be sure to include your project manager so they can review the documents. You'll also want to send deliverables directly to your project manager in a separate email. Okay, progress report. So we do have a progress report template that you can use. This can be found on our website and in the grantee manual. In the progress report, you'll provide updates per task during the billing period. You can discuss the current status of the project, the work that was done, any challenges or successes. And we do love photos and stories. Please share these with your project manager. You can send those directly over to your PM, project manager. Okay, here we have an example of the RFD, request for disbursement form. There are 2 pages to fill out. The cover page summarizes expenses from the billing period, and the second breaks down each expense. We have this form in both PDF and Excel formats, and again, the form can be found on our website. All right, here's page 1, and again, this page summarizes all the expenses from the billing period. The address, which is in this rectangle up top, must match the address listed on the STD 204 form that Evan mentioned, the payee data record form. This is the address where checks would be sent to. Your project manager will send this to you soon if they haven't already. If you'd like checks mailed to a different address, like a PO box, ask your project manager about filling out the STD 205 form in addition to the STD 204. So the task number and name and budget must match the approved work program. So if task 1 is project management, the left side should say task 1, project management, and the task budget includes the allotted amount for that task. Costs incurred during this period is the amount expended, total cost to date, and finally, the remaining balance for each task. We do withhold 5% of each invoice. This will be returned to you in the final invoice at the end of your grant. Page 2 of the RFD further breaks down the expenses listed on page 1. All expenses require you to submit backup documentation except labor. The first section, section A, is direct costs. B is labor. Here you'll list the title, hourly rate, number of hours worked, and task number. Again, you do not need to submit timesheets. However, you should keep these in the event of an audit. Section C is the indirect cost section. Make sure the indirect cost percentage matches the indirect cost rate listed in the work program. And section D is subcontractor charges. You'll list the company name, invoice number, amount, and attach their invoice as backup. The grand total at the bottom of this page should match the total from the first page prior to withholding. All right, here we have some backup documentation examples. Some things to note: you must include paid receipts for materials and supplies. If purchasing anything online, the backup documentation must show that items have shipped. Bank statements are not sufficient backup documentation, so just a reminder, save all your receipts. Travel reimbursement rates can be found on our website. To better support our grantees, we've recently updated our travel rates. If you've been awarded a grant with us before, be sure to check out these new rates, which I'll go over now. We reimburse personal vehicle mileage at 67 cents per mile. This is still the same as the state rate. And we have a little example on the table below that shows how to document mileage reimbursement. You'll want to include the date, locations, mileage, and total amount. We also reimburse travel for gas with receipts and the cost of a rental car. Our lodging rates now match the federal rates, which is higher than the state rates. This information can be found on our travel reimbursement site on our website. And to better support, oops, already said that. Food is now at $60 a day cap instead of various amounts per meal. We can also pay for parking fees and tolls that are incurred during your project. And we have example receipts there as well. Okay, backup documentation. So subcontractors provide a service for the project. You'll want to provide the subcontractor invoices as backup. We have some examples of subcontractors, such as a cultural resource specialist, design consultant, engineers, and their invoices must include a description of the work completed and how much it cost. Before we pause for questions, I do want to mention that we offer advanced funds program. If you're interested in learning more, reach out to your project manager. And now we'll take a brief pause before passing it back to Evan for questions. And it looks like there have been some in the chat that I think Dario answered. Thank you. Any other questions? Okay.
Wonderful. All right. So finally, you have completed your project, and now we're going to cover how we close it out. First of all, we'd love to stay involved in your project. For implementation projects, it's typically required to have a Coastal Conservancy project manager conduct a final site visit at the end to view the completed work. For other types of projects, please still invite us to any other closing events, such as a community event, or include us in your press release development. But the real start of the final is submitting your final RFD and final report to your project manager. This final invoice should include your final progress report and all of the deliverables that were outlined in your work program. You also want to make sure you check that release of withholding box at the end so that you get your full amount that was withheld from each invoice prior. Are there any questions on completion. The last thing I'm hoping to show you all is there are so many resources on our website now, guidance documents, templates, examples. We've been really trying our best to increase the level of guidance that we provide, and we have it in multiple places. So I will go ahead and show you them now. This is the first day that I believe our new website's live. So randomly, I'm also doing a little website promo. So we have a new website. If you go to grants, you'll see lots of information about our grant programs, but the two I would like to highlight right now is our technical assistance page and our resources for grantees. So if you click technical assistance, that will open up this page, and as you can see, there's information on how to apply for our grants. There are older webinars that we've had of how to access our funding, resources for how to manage your grant, including the grantee manual and our resources for grantees page, which I will be showing you next. There's recordings. If you just have a specific question about a particular process, like how to develop your work program budget, you can watch this video from a past grant program onboarding webinar. So lots of resources on here, tips for meaningfully engaging communities or incorporating workforce development in your projects. And also it's down here in Spanish. A little redundant, but we're really just trying to figure out ways to have you all be able to access our information, is our resources for grantees page. And again, lots of guidance documents, including how to invoice to us. But the main thing I want to show you is this grantee manual. This has all of the information you need to know for managing a grant with the Coastal Conservancy in one location. So if you click on that grantee manual link, this page will open up. It shows that there's some flow charts, there's more short videos that you can access. You can go and just see certain sections of the grantee manual based on these questions listed here. What I always do is click the full grantee manual, and then it opens it up, and you can see it's 15 pages long. You can control find and look through here and find almost any information you need. It's relatively short, as I mentioned, but it's filled with links. So, you know, at the beginning of this presentation, I was talking about the typical grant agreement terms. Here they are available within our grantee manual. And so with that, I will stop sharing my screen. And we are perfectly on time. Open it up for any other burning questions you may have. And if there are none, we will be sharing this recording and these materials with you all. And again, congratulations on your grant. Really excited to work with you. Anna.
Hi, thank you guys. I have contractors that are already under contract. Can I use them, or do I need to submit a new RFP?
You can use them potentially. You'll have to work with your project manager. So what's required is you either write them into your work program that you develop as a part of the conditions precedent process. And in your work program, you would include the name of the contractor, their website, a short, maybe 1 or 2 sentence description of why they are best suited to carry out the work. And when your project manager at the Conservancy reviews your work program and approves it, they essentially approve your subcontractor. Another process is you can have your work program developed without listing the subcontractors and then shoot your project manager an email stating that this is the subcontractor you already have under contract. You're hoping to continue working with them, but recognize that you need project manager approval at the Coastal Conservancy. In that email, again, you would say, this is their name, this is their website, This is, maybe their application to your RFP you had. And then get approval via email from your project manager. Either approach is fine.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Suzanne, did you have a question?
No, I often get the react and the hand raise mixed up. I was just going to be applauding you guys. Thank you. It was really helpful.
No, no problem. Thank you.
I'm so glad. Fantastic. All right. Well, thank you again for joining. We really appreciate you and your work and look forward to working with you more.
Thank you so much. This is really helpful.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
I like your website. Great.
Thank you.
I know where to go.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye. All right.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. I'm ending it.
Really clear.
Thank you.